Hi everyone, it's Athena. This will be the first video discussing my trip to Greece in terms of my experience. And I'm in my first week. Let's see, today is Sunday, 12/8, and I arrived on Tuesday, so it hasn't been one full week yet, but almost there. Um, I'm gonna start this one out with this little cup of coffee here, my Pizzani. I still suck at Greek and I know that, but I'm working on it. And I also still suck at making the Greek coffee. But it's symbolic of a work in progress. Hmm. Why though this little cup of coffee? This cup of coffee is just so symbolic of my week. I'll just preface this with I just made this coffee. It took me 13 minutes to make this one cup. There's no more coffee, there's no pot. There's just this one cup, 13 minutes. And I still didn't do it correctly. It's such a delicate process to make Greek coffee. Greek coffee is totally different than any other coffee. Um, it requires an attention to it in terms of all of your senses to make it correctly. I did make one correctly earlier today, but it's okay, work in progress. It's supposed to have this cream on it that comes from the coffee itself, from letting it sit and just about to boil, but not all the way. And then you take it off the stove and cool it just a little bit, and then you put it back on and then let it bubble up a little bit more. It can't break the surface. And you do that a number of times until you develop this creamy top. And it's, I've the people that I've chatted with about it tell me it's really like a meditation. You have to be able to not just see it, but hear it, listen to it. It's almost like you have to feel the coffee. And yeah, it's taken the Greek coffee's taken a center stage to my experience this week. It's been very, very interesting. Um, so as those of you who've been following me for a while and engaging with me on social media for a while know, it was a process. A process to make this happen. I moved out of my home. I got rid of most of my stuff. I'm talking like 90% of my worldly items. Um, it just seemed like that whole, like, just moving and getting rid of everything. It just was like going on and on and on. And I was like, what I thought should take 2 weeks, it took like 3 months. It was almost driving me crazy. And I just felt like it was this kind of like symbolic uh, reaction of the material world against me. I was like, I finally ended up calling a junk company to come and get my stuff and just take it to a donation center because I just felt like I couldn't get rid of it. And it was just bogging me down, and it was taking up so much of my time to prepare for this journey. I mean, in the end, I was like, it was like a disease or something. I was like, just please get it away from me. And then I had to finally do all the preparations, and then I had other obligations I had to tie up, and it's just like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I left my contract position, so I had to tie up all that stuff, for work, be professional, et cetera. And then finally, about like 2 weeks before I came to Greece, it was like I started ramping down, ramping down. And it's been such an interesting process because I remember the first day I didn't have to work and I didn't have all the stuff. I was in Virginia. I actually flew out for a job interview. Um, but it was chill, it was cool, and I was with my brother. I just remember like laying in bed and I was like and in my whole mind is like, you know, because the first thing I always think about in the morning is, okay, what am I gonna do today? And I make like a plan in my Virgo mind as to what I'm gonna do before I even get out of bed. And it was, what are you gonna do today? And I'm like, nothing. And I made myself, like I forced myself to like lay in bed and I put on some Hertz tones and I just chilled and watched myself, finally my body like relax, 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 relax. And then, you know, like a week before I came on the trip, I started witnessing myself like enjoying things again, you know. And I don't want to say I was unhappy in life. I wasn't unhappy in life, but I didn't necessarily enjoy life, you know. Like I would happily make my son dinner, but it didn't mean I was in, because I love him, and I want to nurture him, but I didn't necessarily enjoy it because I was exhausted all the time. And I just remember standing in the kitchen, you know, about a week before I came to Greece, and I made this whole dinner, and I just stopped and I was like, oh my God, I just spent like 2 hours making dinner. Like the idea of spending 2 hours making dinner was like a super foreign thing for me at that point. But I enjoyed every minute of it. I just enjoyed doing it. You know, I haven't been able to enjoy cooking in just so long. And I was like stoked about it. And then I remember taking my son up to go visit our friends just a few days before I left for Greece, and we stopped to get a snack on the way. And I said, oh my gosh, Miko. And he said, what, Mom? And I said, we're driving up to see our friends. And I said, we always have fun with them, but I'm actually just enjoying the drive. And he's like, yeah. And I said, yeah. I said, I'm not like chronically exhausted. I don't have a million things on my mind, you know. And it really started setting in for me this kind of foundation that followed itself with me to my first kind of like lessons here in Greece, which is how trapped in our modern society we are. And for those of you who live in maybe like more like America, or Western nations that are really busy all the time, you may have heard things like, oh, well, you know, in certain European countries or in Greece, life is much slower. And that's absolutely true, but that's honestly, that's just like scratching the surface. If you're having what my friend would call the real Greek experience, it's kind of embedded in those cultures to do things more slowly, but there's a deeper purpose for that, because it's not just about taking your time and relaxing and doing it slowly. It's founded on this idea of enjoying everything in your life. And I just, you know, I know it's what gets me is it's so obvious, right? We all just want to enjoy our life, and yet we just get so trapped into things so easily. I had a conversation with a friend of mine just, let's see, 2 days ago, and we get on the phone, and we had set a meeting. And he's like, oh, I'm just walking in the door, I'll call you in 3 minutes. I said, oh, no, it's fine, take your time. And, you know, call me when you're ready. And he calls me and I'm like, hey, how's it going? He's like, oh, you know, I just, you know, got back from the office, got back-to-back meetings, just trying to do this and that. And I said, well, hey, do you want to reschedule the call? And he's like, no, this is the perfect time, because after this, I just have meetings all day. And I can tell you, as somebody who just, you know, left my job in corporate America, that's standard, that's normal. Like life just eats up your time, and you expect so much of yourself and others expect so much of you, and the societal pressure for doing, it's embedded in us from the time we're very, very young. We go to school and we're taught you're gonna go to school and then you're gonna go to college and then you're gonna get a job and you're gonna get married, you're gonna do this, right? I mean, I've watched people that I know in their 30s have existential crises because they're 35 years old and they don't have a flush career and they're not married and they just have like a mental health crisis over it. I just saw this only a few years ago, and in a few years before that was someone else. Like it's that cultivated in our minds, right? These landmarks that we have to hit, and the value that we have or don't have based on that. And you know, I watched myself struggling to like let this go for like a really long time, because it impacts us on like such a deep existential level. And what really, really got me was when I showed up here, right, I thought, okay, cool. I let all this stuff go. I'm ready to go. I'm just gonna spend my time traveling around Greece, relaxing, studying mystery traditions. Like I'm about to live my best life ever, right? And my friend says, "Oh yeah, so you're relaxed now?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I feel better than I've had in a long time." And he looks at me. "No, you're not relaxed." I said, "Yeah, I said I'm totally fine." He's like, "Nah, maybe it's jet lag." I'm like, "No, I feel like I put myself on a Greek schedule for like the past week, so I'll feel good when I get here." He's like, "No, you need to go rest." And I said, "Well, I just got here. We're gonna hang out." And he's like, "No, I'm gonna go home, you sleep, and I'll be back later." And I was like, "Okay." So he left, I went to sleep. Later on he comes back and we're walking around the city. He says, "Yeah, I don't think you're relaxed yet." And I said, "No, really, I'm fine." And he's like, "No." I said, You don't know me. I'm fine," right? All of a sudden it comes out of me. And he says, "Yeah, so you're here, you want to study the Greek mysteries, huh?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, first you have to learn how to be Greek." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" He goes, "First you have to develop the mind of a Greek." And so me as a scientist, the first thing I think of well, is the cultural perspective, etc. But what I came to learn very clearly over the past week is that no, it's much more than that. It's about a state of consciousness. And I remember some time ago reading this, doing some studies on ancient Greek culture, and there was this idea that came up in one of the readings I was doing, where there was this belief that anyone could be Hellenas, i.e. that anyone could be Greek. And we're not talking about, by blood or culturally, etc. What they meant was have this state of consciousness right. And again, I just want to emphasize that this set of videos and the research I'm doing, isn't about one culture or religion or belief system over others, right? It's about a universal understanding. For them, being Elinas was a state of consciousness that superseded the intellect. And that meant that anyone who studied these fundamental universal principles that they cherished so deeply in their society could develop that. Now, does that mean that everybody does just because they're exposed to it? Absolutely not. I mean, I'm here in Greece today, and I can tell you, you walk all around Athens and you see the Parthenon and all these, beautiful ruins everywhere. There's a beautiful museum and all kinds of stuff. And people live here, and what's happening? I'm watching this gentrification of Athens happening, and my friend is telling me you know, about how people are moving further and further and further away from this, just even just the cultural kind of vibe of taking things just like a little bit slower. It still exists, but there's, you know, the whole area is starting to become developed for tourists, and people are taking on, you know, more and more and more of that kind of perspective. And so that was very striking for me, this idea that, you know, even here, of course, so easily things get taken away, you know, over the course of history. And one could say, well, you know, if it's so normal to you, you know, you look outside and see the Parthenon every single day. It's just like growing up in the mountains. You may not recognize, you know, the beauty of what you have. But the truth is that you know, you can be anywhere in the world and recognize truth, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, if that's what you want, if that's what you're seeking. And this idea of anybody being able to be enough really has to do with this universal recognition that, or this recognition of the universal idea that everybody can live in this elevated state of consciousness. But it is certainly, you know, it's not exemplified really in our society, right? The closest you get in our societies are religions. And, you know, I can say one thing that I've observed over my lifetime is a pulling away from religion. People don't trust it as a system anymore. And people really don't trust systems at all anymore. People don't trust corporate America, people don't trust political systems, people don't trust religious systems, because humanity recognizes that what we have right now does not exist to protect us. And so there's been this questioning that's been happening for a long period of time, you know, in terms of what that means and how to get out of it and how to free oneself. And I thought a lot about this. Most interestingly, I thought a lot more about it when my friend said to me, the first thing that you need to do is learn how to drink coffee for 3 hours. And you know, there's this part of me inside that said, drink coffee for 3 hours. Like I have stuff that I'm supposed to do, but when I came here, I said to myself, the only thing that I'm gonna do is be open. Just be open to whatever the experience is. Yes, I want to hang out in the library for weeks on end. Yes, I want to go to the Oracle in Delphi. Yes, I want to do lots of stuff, but I knew up front that I should not rob myself. And so while there's this little part of me that was like, drink coffee for 3 hours, you know, there was a greater part of me that said, you know what, you need to just go with it. So I went to this coffee house the other day and I ordered the Greek coffee, and I sat there and what am I doing? What am I doing for the first few hours? Editing pics, screwing around, doing this, doing that. And finally my friend calls me and he says, where are you at? And I said, I'm at the coffee house. He goes, okay, I'm gonna come down there. It'll take me 45 minutes. I get off the phone and all of a sudden I just had this epiphany. Oh man, I'm supposed to be drinking coffee for 3 hours and I don't think I did it right. I said, I'm just sitting here screwing around, you know, letting my mind be focused on stuff. And so I saw that there was another chair at the table where I could sit and stare out the window. So I moved over to that chair and I just started drinking the coffee and staring out into space. And maybe for some people, this is a very regular thing to do, not for me. And the first thing, you know, as my mind is just drifting and drifting and drifting away, is I started to think about this idea of practice. at least for how I've experienced it in America, in terms of spiritual traditions and things. I'll take yoga as a great example. And when I mean yoga, I don't mean the system of yoga that, you know, is practiced as a whole 8-limbed system. I mean just yoga asana, the postures. And I'm sure many of you out there have done this at some point. You're at your yoga studio, or you're at the gym or whatnot. And it's very common to hear things like, okay, just go ahead and just put your thoughts away for the day. This is your time on the mat, all that'll be there later. This is your practice. What you do here, you're gonna take with you. So just let yourself be in the moment. And so you let yourself go for an hour, if you're lucky. And you get into the asana, and then you try to take that space with you. And if you talk to people who do this, right, they'll tell you, yeah, I practice yoga over time. It's really helped bring balance to my life. I think about things differently. You know, I lead my life a little bit more balanced, but still, they're still stuck in the rat race, right? It's a little bit more comfortable. It's a little less, you know. And what I started to recognize is you know, what we've done in the West essentially is a Band-Aid method for everything. You know, we're working all the time, we're killing ourselves. We barely have time to spend with our families. And what do? We put a Band-Aid on it. We go take some medication that the doctor gives us so we're not anxious. We go to yoga for a couple hours a week to just try to like center our nervous system, just even enact the parasympathetic nervous system at all. And then we buy all this stuff so that while we're sitting here in our very stressed out life, like we can look at all the nice stuff and say, oh, look how great, I'm doing. Or any other, I mean, there's innumerable examples of how we use these Band-Aids essentially to pretend that things are great. And, I feel like over the decades that I've studied stuff, I've really, I finally started like getting it. I finally started getting it, and I was like, what needs to happen is just get out. You just need to get out. And I went through the whole struggle of just trying to like get out, even if it was just for a short period of time, right? And I come here, and my friend is telling me, yes, that's great, but you're still not even in the space. He's essentially telling me, like, if you even want to absorb the information, like really on the level that you're looking for, you need to be in this space. And I've had a lot of experiences with higher states of consciousness, speaking to my higher self. I've seen that demonstrated as fact, right? It's not like, oh yeah, just making up in my mind and living my life. No, I'm told something explicitly it happens for years and years and years, over and over and over again. It's been very, very verifiable to me. And even my friend says to me, like, you're functioning at a much higher level than other people I know, but you're still not where you need to be. That was very, I don't even know how to describe it. I guess one would say humbling. But I feel like that's not the right word. It was poignant. It was poignant for me because I know, intellectually speaking, there's always another layer you can go, another level you could go, another level you could go. And he knows what it is I really, really want. And he's telling me straight up as my someone who knows me really well, like, you're not there yet, hun. Go drink coffee for 3 hours and then let's discuss. And so in this last hour before my friend gets there, it was so interesting because I've never done this before in my life. I've never just sat there and just drank coffee and stared off into space, literally. I really thought about it, like, have I ever actually done this? No. Have I sat and enjoyed a little coffee for like 10 minutes or something? Sure. But just nothing on my mind. I'm not worried about I gotta go to work and all the things I gotta do. No, just nothing on my plate, staring off into space, smelling the coffee, listening, watching people. That was just such a different experience. So then, so then my friend arrives and he says, "Oh yeah, what have you been doing?" And I said, very proudly, I've been drinking coffee for 3 hours. And he goes, "Oh." He goes, "Oh, that's great. Next thing you need to do is go back to your place and he says, stare at the ceiling for 2 hours. I said, what are you, like a Greek version of the Mr. Miyagi or something? And I start having all these visions of like kung fu movies and stuff, but in there they're like punching sand and like, beating up like wooden men and everything like that. And you're like, yeah, this is like, I thought to myself, wow, how crazy is it for us as human beings that what's hard for us is to just sit for a prolonged period of time without anything on our plates. Like A, just to get it off our plate, that's hard. B, to be okay with it, right? To not be just feel all guilty about all the stuff you just let go. And then C, to actually sit there, I mean, I've taught people how to meditate just for like 20 minutes. And I've watched people more than I can count. They can barely sit there for 5 minutes. And so I'm sitting here feeling like, man, I'm essentially like, I can't sit there for 5 minutes. Maybe it's a little longer period of time, but it's the same. It's the same, right? And so I was like, okay. And I did do it. I did do it later on the week. I just laid in the bed and I stared at the ceiling for 2 hours. And I don't even know how to explain the experience, right? I'm sure one can imagine wrestling with boredom. That I've overcome that idea. Like when I was in the cafe, I was like, oh, I got some free time. I'm gonna do some stuff I enjoy, right? And then I recognized, maybe what I'm supposed to be doing is just witnessing, observing. If I tell myself, okay, I'm gonna be in this space, I can detach myself from the boredom idea. But what I recognized is I was always still doing something. I was still meditating. I was still praying. I was still, something. The idea of just letting my mind wander, go wherever it wanted to, recognize anything, whether that was a physical sensation or a contemplative thought or a desire, and to see where my thoughts and mind went. I mean, honestly, it's a fantastic litmus test for where you are in your consciousness. I could just tell that already, because I can see immediately if you are tied up inside with a lot of stuff, a lot of stress, a lot of worries, etc. When you lay there and stare at the ceiling for 2 hours, that's what you're going to be thinking about. If you can let that go, I see the next step is to sit there and think about all your traumas. That's always the next phase. When people let go of the stress, like the acute stress stuff, it's into trauma land. And then after that, if you've been able to break yourself free of that, then you can go into more, philosophical things or thinking about what you want to do or whatnot, right? And so I'm like watching this whole experience kind of unfold. And then, in addition, I'm staring at a blank white ceiling for 2 hours. There's nothing to focus on. It's featureless. And it was like I just I don't know, it was like I went right up into the sky or something, but I mean, it was like, it was like beyond, and like I said, I've had, deep mystical experiences before, but they've always been in conjunction with, some kind of practice, right? Meditative practice or ritual experience or something like that. And this is what really got me in the end was, all of these systems exist to get us to the point where we can break ourselves free from a human state of consciousness and transcend that to experience the ultimate divine. And yes, I recognize I've been cultivating my consciousness for a really, really, really long time. And so, just that practice of staring up at the ceiling, maybe I was able to make more of a leap than would be common. But what got me is that there's this idea that's ingrained within us that, you have to have your practice, and then there's your regular life, and you try to bring the space of your practice into your regular life. And I have taught my students over the years, like, when you start to recognize there's no difference between what you do in the temple and what you do in your regular life, like that's a huge leap for you in terms of how you live your life. Like, once you stop thinking that there's mundane and spiritual and just recognize it's all the same, right? Then the way you perceive things in your life every single day becomes very different. But again, back to a previous point I made, there's layers and layers and layers. And this was like another layer for me to understand that there's a lie that's embedded in us, that we can't live a regular normal life, right? And still be in this kind of space. And I would say, upon reflection, that's true to some degree. I think, and I'm just gonna posit this, because I'm not gonna say anything's impossible. Maybe if you're really Mr. Miyagi or something like that, but to live a life where you are constantly working, chronically exhausted, running around all the time, every moment of your day is taken up by some stuff, and when you finally have some free time, you're just, you just want to watch the TV or whatever. I think it would be very difficult to live that lifestyle and have the ability to have that just experience of, I guess, being in the zone or whatnot. Being able to extract yourself, though, from what we think that we need in life. Like, why do we do all that stuff in the first place? Because we're told we need to achieve these certain landmarks, or we need to have this stuff, and it gets reinforced in our consciousness. Gotta have the house and the car and then whatever, right? But I'm over here in Greece, and while I can see this gentrification happening, and I see this, it's like a slow movement over to this more fast-paced, consumerist, cultured lifestyle in this heavy tourist area, of course. I still see the people, that are walking around. They still have jobs, right? They still have jobs, they're still doing stuff or whatever, but it's like the look in their eyes is different. It's different. So this idea that you can't have both, right? It's bullshit to me. It's just, I don't know that you can have, one, the super fast, busy paced lifestyle, and incorporate that with a meaningful, slow paced lifestyle where you actually have time to sit and contemplate or stare at the ceiling for a few hours, because our time is managed too much by everything. Our time is constantly managed by everything from the time we're very young and we start going to school until we retire, it's, our time is constantly taken from us. It's almost like the real slavery that we find ourselves in is being a slave to that which takes away our time. And so what I learned, you know, this week, and those are just two like experiences of many in this very poignant lesson, is that you can live a life. You don't have to become a monk. You don't have to become a hermit. You actually can have the ability to live your life in a much freer way, but you have to be willing to let go of a lot of things that you place on yourself in terms of expectations and what that relates to in terms of your value. Like, can you go from living in a big, beautiful house, you know, that everybody's in awe of, to something that's small, so that you can quit that corporate job and free up time in your life to relax and enjoy and read a book and stare off into space for 2 hours, and then go and have energy for your kid and enjoy your time with your kid and give them, you know, the nourishment that they need, and just enjoy that space. That's something that we never talk about in our society. It's always, if you want to be happier, you have to have more. I literally, outside of spiritual texts, I have never heard anyone say, if you want to be happy, you need to have less, or you should have less. Just get rid of that. I haven't heard that. I don't hear that. I've never ever heard that outside of spiritual texts. And yet, you know, as somebody who grew up dirt poor and then made my own way in life and made a lot of money and then got rid of all the stuff, you know, and I mean, I'll be honest with you, I spent 50 euros since I've been here. I'm trying to live on the least amount possible, right now. I want to see what's the least I can do, what's the least I need to do. You know, I was gonna come here, go shopping at the thrift stores and stuff. I brought like 3 pairs of clothes with me. I've just been wearing them. I've just been wearing them. I ran out of those clothes days ago. I'm washing them in the sink and just wearing them. You know, and for many people, I recognize there are many people in many countries that'll say, well, that's normal. It's not normal in the United States, right? And I know that a lot of people I'm talking to right now come from my cultural background, right? That this doesn't translate to everyone. I recognize that. And I also recognize that the issues that people who do live in countries have may or may not relate to the ones that I have. Again, this is my personal experience that I'm video blogging, and I don't attempt to project that on anyone or anything. And so hopefully anybody who's watching this can recognize that this is my personal journey, and it may or may not be indicative of yours, and it may represent a small slice of modern living that isn't representative of everyone, and I do recognize this. So it's not my intention to be incompassionate with others. It's just my intention to again, record my own experiences and also demonstrate that at every level of society, we're all slaves to something, right? I know people like I'm watching it over here in Athens right now. This magnification of consumerism, right? The luxury that comes with it, you know, the refacing of all these buildings. You know, as properties are built up and turned into Airbnbs, it just looks so much nicer in certain areas. And people are, you know, they're lauding that. And then I see signs on the street about meetings and stuff related to gentrification. Other people are not lauding it at all. You know, there's plus and minuses to everything, but for myself, what I learned was, you know, and going from someone and going as someone who went from a place of you know, growing up and eating nothing but mac and cheese and peanut butter and honey sandwiches for like 8 years of my life, while my mom worked 2 jobs and went to school, and I practically raised myself as a latchkey kid, to someone who made enough money to go on all these trips and have a nice house and stuff like that. I was happy to a certain degree because I felt accomplished and I felt like I had all those litmus tests, but I did not enjoy life. And I didn't feel that it equated to value in who I was as a person or in the way that I was living my life. I feel blessed that I was able to recognize that, and give myself the ability to see what something different could be like. And where things go after this, I don't know. I honestly, at this point, I just don't. I really can't see myself returning to corporate America. I just think it's a horrible, corrupt institution. I've seen way too much. I feel like I would rather definitely do something different, because yeah, I never resonated with it at all. And the things I've seen are just incomprehensible to me. Maybe I'll do a video about that one day, but I'm gonna end this particular video blog on that note. And yeah, I have some research to do. My Mr. Miyagi out here gave me some research to do now that he's determined I've maybe I've relaxed enough to actually, you know, dive into some stuff, which is just funny. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, the whole experience is so interesting to me because, you know, we just meet certain people in our lives that I feel like they just know us. And you know, he's like a laser beam. And I'm just like, I'm going with it, you know, I'm letting go of all this control in my mind of all the things I have to do, I need to do, whatever. And I'm like, okay, you know what, if I lay on the bed for 2 months and stare off into space, you know, and that's what the spirit wants, and that's what I get over here, I feel like I need to learn, I feel like I need to be comfortable with that, because that's exactly what I'll need. Now, definitely I do hope to go do some other stuff. But I came here for the truth, which I recognize is a combination between the external and the internal. And so I'm really just trying to let everything go, just as much as possible. Everything that is tied up inside of me, I'm really striving to just, and every single day, I just see the details of it, right? How many ties are that bind us internally. So I feel like the first week has been very successful, and I'm very pleased with things. And I do feel like I've moved into another state. Am I at that state yet? Am I at that state? I don't know. But I feel like the universe will let me know if I'm in that state, if I'm ready to receive other things. But certainly what I feel like I received this week were some very good lessons on, I guess I'll call it the ties that bind. So cheers to you. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.